Hey, LifePoint family. Today we're going to talk about grief, sadness, anger, guilt, and pain. Things that we want to avoid, but also things that are inevitable. Lament helps us to process through the difficult stuff that we experience. So what's lament? As a noun, is passionate expression of grief or sorrow. Song or poem expressing that sorrow. An expression of regret or disappointment. A complaint. And as a verb, lament is defined as mourning, expression of one's deep grief, expressing regret or disappointment over something considered unsatisfactory, unreasonable, or unfair. While those definitions are true and correct, as Christians, we lament, meaning more than the expression of sorrow of grief. Lament is a form of communication or prayer that we have with God. Lament results from our expressions caused by events such as grief, loss, or destruction. We can lament for personal, individual experiences like death of a loved one, job loss, recognizing sin committed, depression. But we can also lament collectively, things like September 11th, or a natural disaster, war, or a pandemic. There's 4 elements when we lament to God. First, we need to recognize the emotions caused by an event. Bad things happen to us, but we don't always acknowledge how those things make us feel. The authors of many of the Psalms wrote about their anguish, their sadness, anger, or fear. It's good for us to recognize our emotions instead of hiding them away. We don't have to worry if God cares about them either. Psalm 34:18-9 tells us that the Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all. Second, we communicate. Tell God what you're going through and how you feel by identifying the pain, the questions, and the frustrations. Lamenting to God turns us to Him rather than inward towards self and isolation. Lamentations 1:20 says, "Look, O Lord, for I am in distress. My stomach churns. My heart is wrung within me because I have been very rebellious." Psalm 13:1-2, "How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I take counsel in my soul and have sorrow in my heart all the day?" Third, ask. Boldly petition God for what you need and want. Lamenting allows us to ask God to move in situations, make changes to circumstances, or stop whatever it is that's causing us to lament. Hebrews 4:16 says, "Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need." Psalm 107:6, "Then they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and He delivered them from their distress." Fourth, let's trust. Believe the promise that God has your best interest in His mind. Remember all that He has done for you and others in times of sorrow. Trust that lamenting is only for a season, not for a whole lifetime. Psalms 13:5-6, "But I have trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because He has dealt bountifully with me." Lamentations 3:21-24, "But this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They're new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will hope in Him." So why lament? Ecclesiastes 3 tells us that everything has a season. And in verse 4, a time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance. And because we live in a world affected by sin, we will inevitably experience the consequences of that sin throughout our life. Those consequences can come in the form of death, hatred, disaster, selfishness, and so on. We can experience those consequences individually, culturally, or globally. Looking to the Bible, there's many examples. An individual is Job. He lost loved ones, finances, all in a short period of time. Globally, Israel is an example of a people group who suffered collectively in captivity, which resulted in death, loss of homes, loss of freedom, and so much more. These types of events cause anguish, grief, disappointment, anger, frustration, and many other emotions. Feeling the weight of sin can cause us to feel guilt and shame. The good news is all of these heavy and sorrowful emotions are momentary, but only if we sort through them in the process of lament. Without lament, we risk numbness to the joys we experienced in life. Too often, people try to hide and put on a happy face for others and themselves when we go through tough times. Lamenting gives us a way to give God and ourselves honest and raw acknowledgement of our pain and suffering. And when we tell God instead of pretending it doesn't exist, the Holy Spirit has permission to heal and restore. Lament is not about sitting in pain and sorrow. It's both expressing suffering and hope. We can fully feel the weight of suffering while having faith and hope that God is working in the midst of our situations, knowing that they are temporary. God gave us the template for lamenting in the Bible. Even Jesus lamented the fact that he would endure the cross in Mark 14 when he told the disciples to sit while he prayed. And he said to them, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death." In verse 36, he said to God, "Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will." Lament was part of Hebrews culture. Jacob, Job, and David are just a few of those examples that tore their garments in lament over grief or sin. And they also paid professionals for demonstrations of grief and mourning. They outwardly displayed their inner condition. In American culture, we aren't as familiar with lament. We've been conditioned to say, "I'm okay," when asked how we're doing. Somewhere along the way, we've come to believe that we need to have it all together for others, ourselves, and God. Lamenting helps us to be honest and process through emotions and experience when we're not okay. There's different ways that we can express lament. Outwardly, there are visual or audible things that we can do before God, such as crying, talking to Him, singing. And we can do that by ourselves, or we can do that with others that we trust. Inwardly, we can lament by journaling or writing a letter to God. And one of my favorites, creatively, we can create art. We can write a song or a poem. Expressions of lament will look, feel, and sound different depending on the person and the situation. What's most important isn't the how, but that we actually lament to God so that we allow Him to work in us and in the situation that is causing pain and suffering. Difficult times inevitably come and go as we live on this earth. Lament is a beneficial process and a tool to help us through those times along our faith journey. It helps us to surrender our pain and suffering to God rather than mask it in a false happiness for ourselves or others. And it allows the Holy Spirit to intercede on our behalf.